one.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, June 25th, 0800, and call the SELCO Commission meeting to order. With that said, our first item on the agenda is to review the bill schedules and warrants for May of 2024. Do we have any comments or questions on the warrants?
Just one. There was a new truck purchase for like over $300,000. Was that something that was in the, well, was it budgeted? Was it something that we had waiting on? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
One other thing, the energy refunds that you give people, where does that money come from? Is that?
We have a pool of money that was set aside for those energy loans.
Okay, so you have a pool.
Yes, and then we recycle it. So as we get, people pay off the loans, we, loan it back out and we keep.
Oh, right, yeah, so they're paying off as it goes too.
Right.
Is that the same with the rebates that we give out?
The rebates are budgeted every year.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion to accept the bill schedules and warrants as presented for May of 2024?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the meeting minutes of May 28th, 2024. Any comments or corrections to those minutes? Hearing no comments, do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next into the exciting meat of the matter of the meeting this month is we review the first quarter electric financials.
Okay, good morning.
And who are you?
I am Jim Zacco, the Director of Finance and Administration.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe it's entire screen. Okay, so as Bob just said, we're going to start off today with the 2024 Q1 electric financials, and then we will go into the 2024 Q1 cable financials. So jumping into the electric, we're taking a look at our income statement, and you can see here quarter to date and year to date, because it's Q1, are the same, but from plan we are 1% over plan with our operating revenue, and when you look at our operating expenses, they are about 7% below plan. Jumping down to our net income, we are about 138% above plan. And this is because we've kind of controlled expenses a little bit, and we are a little bit over on our revenue. So this is actually a good sign because we had planned to be under at this point. And you can see we're 0.6% of plan. Taking a look at our year-over-year numbers, we are down revenue-wise 22% year-to-date. And when you take a look at our operating expenses, they are also down about 10%. Overall, our operating net income is down 88%. Now, this was known because last year we had the GTA overcollection, so we knew this year would be a little bit lower. Now, before we get into the balance sheet, I wanted to go over something with you guys that is, why is net income important, right? We see this figure every time I present the financials, and just to kind of walk through what is this and why is it kind of important, what is it used for? So to start this off, and I may get a little tongue-tied on this one because it's kind of a difficult concept, and we tried to break it down into a logical explanation so everybody at home could follow. But we'll start off with, like, what is net income, right? You have your revenue minus your expenses, that equals your income or your loss. Now, when you take a look overall, you have both the operating and non-operating revenue and expenses that make up your net income. So if we jump back to this slide, up here, these are your operating revenues, these are the operating expenses, and then down here you have your other income and other deductions, which are your non-operating expenses and revenue. Taking a look at, what is net income used for if it's not used for part of your expenses? So why are you collecting extra money if your revenue minus your expenses equals your net income? Well, if all your expenses are being covered, what are you using it for? Well, we use it to fund, capital improvements, and that can be direct or via our depreciation fund. We use this to, have our cash on hand, so our operating fund. Our pilot contributions come from this. We can bolster our reserves from this, and kind of our catch-all, if you will, there might be other business opportunities. This could be used for, collecting money from, bonding for projects. Some towns could, have used this in the past to buy back other utility services, items like that. So now, if we take a look, next question someone might have is, wouldn't capital improvements be reported as expenses, right? Because you have your revenue minus your expenses equals your net income. So why aren't the capital, expenses in that? Well, no, they're not captured on an income statement. Basically, the way a capital expense becomes captured on an income statement is through depreciation expense. So a portion of that capitalized asset is depreciated monthly over the lifetime of that asset, and that's what hits your income statement. In Massachusetts, we are required to have what they call a depreciation fund. This fund is set up to help provide coverage for future asset replacements. Yearly, the state requires us to fund that depreciation account in the amount of our yearly depreciation expense. So for example, let's say we have $2.4 million in depreciation expense, we should be transferring over $2.4 million into the depreciation fund. But this can also be offset by current year's capital expenditures. So if you spend $2.4 million that year, you don't necessarily have to put a transfer in. That now can become a management philosophy or practice or decision you could make at that time. So on the other side, yes, we do see these reported kind of as expenses on our cash flow. So as we get to our cash flow later, we're going to have cash received, and then we have cash expenditures. Those cash expenditures also include our capital purchases. Now, what does this mean? A company could have a positive net income and could go negative on cash, right? You could have $200,000 of net income one year and spend capital-wise $5 million, and your cash flow goes down. That is something we'll see on the cable side later, as we collected for the fiber project ahead of time, and at a certain point, as the bond money runs out, we're going to be spending our reserves that we've collected for that project, so our cash will go down from what we're bringing in, because we're not going to try to bring in the same amount of money to cover that we did for the project, if that makes sense. So now, the question is, how do we prevent this? Well, the answer is the cost of service study. So this is kind of a little bit of a future tickler for what you'll see at another meeting. But basically, with a cost of service study, you set your target net income. And you do this based on projected future capital expenses, your estimated pilot contributions, and then there are health of the business ratios that you want to stay within to make sure you're not having a negative impact on the business. Those are something that we're actually looking into, and at some point we will be adding those to the financial presentation as we figure out which ones are the ones that are appropriate for our business. Now, this is just an example to kind of walk everybody through, but over here, this is just our quarterly income statement that you saw a couple of slides ago. In our example here, I just extrapolated out everything, 4 months, so times it by 4. But let's say our net income is $885. You have a depreciation expense of $2.4 million. I took, our estimated pilot contribution from this year, and you'll see we have a $2.2 million shortfall. Now, taking a look at how this process would work for the cost of service study, you'd take a target estimate amount to see, will this cover? You'd see the depreciation expense, the pilot contribution, and you can see we have enough money to cover. Now, one thing to note, these examples, I just used straight depreciation expense, not necessarily what is the capital additions that's budgeted. Now, can a capital spending be higher than depreciation expense? The answer is yes. You can go into a year and let's say you have, five vehicles in your fleet and you have to add additional vehicles. You may decide that we're not going to take any of that money, to purchase the new vehicles out of depreciation expense. We're going to spend all that money, brand new. We're going to take it out of operating. That would mean that your depreciation expense still has to be funding for, your recovery into your depreciation fund, but you still need money to cover your new capital assets. Now, the cost of service study takes a look at the future capital needs and makes sure we have enough money to kind of cover those expenses and we don't go negative in cash flow. This information now becomes factored in to when we're doing rate design. So in the previous slide, if the number was 3.5 million was our desired net income, we would then use that number to target what do our rates have to be to get us that result. One thing to also know, different areas of our rates are designed to cover different expenses. So something like our GTA cannot cover capital expenses. That is for purchase power cost only. Okay? Now, that was a lot of information, so before I jump over to the balance sheet, any questions in that area? Okay. So now, moving on to our balance sheet for Q1, you can see our total current assets decreased about 1 million, and our total non-current assets decreased about 5.5 million, bringing our total assets to decrease 6.6 million. If we take a look at this, the preponderance of this decrease is our net pension asset. In this 8.3 million, that is the GASB 67, 68 entry effect that we talked about during the audit. 2023's had a very heavy impact. Jumping down to the liability section, our total liabilities decreased 5.7 million, and our earned surplus decreased 900,000. That brings our total liabilities and earned surplus down to 6.6 million. Again, the preponderance of this decrease is contributed to our GASB 67 and 68 entries.
Okay, so just to take a step back from that and just to, so that GASB entry, right, it's impacted by what the value is in the assets. So that's not real like cash numbers, right? It's
Correct.
and it's gonna fluctuate from year to year.
And we just happened to see one of the first years that at least I've been here and I could see historically that it had such a large impact.
Yeah, and I also think there was another factor in that is the change in employees. So as we have a younger base, you're going to see that be a different number, right?
Yes.
That's going to impact.
Yes, it will fluctuate based on the demographics of our employees and all of those type of things, because whatever the calculations are that are done on the actuary side, that's all based on predicted future life expectancy, what someone would get paid out, when, and how. The details behind how all that works, I don't fully understand. That's more on their side, but I do understand that overarching principle.
But it's also like something that we don't know that number until we go to do the audited financial statements. That's when we get the actuarial numbers. So.
Exactly. There's nothing we can do to impact that number, to change, to guess, because it could even change in the course of 2 or 3 months if they were to do the same evaluation based on, indicators of the markets.
Correct.
Is that the one number one of the numbers that we're not independent with the town with? We're allocated,
Correct.
I guess, based on census of the whole employee base, or is it further?
I think it's even more than that. So we are included, I believe, with the town, but I think we also have our own funds, if you will. So the inclusion with the town would be the same person is running the numbers and looking at the same situational variables, but we do have our own dollar amounts and our own funding, so they're making sure we're appropriately funded as SELCO, because our dollars would not, commingle with the town.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thanks.
Okay, so jumping down to cash flow, we started off the year with about 6 million in cash, and currently through March we are at 6.3 million. We did have a transfer from the depreciation fund this year into the operating fund from expenses for capital purchases last year. This brings our total available electric funds from about 16 million, remaining at 16 million. Now, one of the reasons we talked just about the cost of service stuff earlier was there will be, a cost of service study presented and a proposal for rate increases, because I do not expect these numbers to stay the same without some type of rate increase. We would see the end total cash drop. Any questions?
The decrease in revenue is due to, I think you said a large decrease in revenue. Is that due just to demand and weather, or is there?
So our revenue actually, I think, just went up, or it's increased if we go back based on our budget. We're 1% over. The decrease year over year,
Right.
That is more because last year we also had the impact of a higher GTA. So some of that was we weren't,
Our rate.
because of the volatility of the market, we decided instead of lowering our GTA to keep it set where it was.
Okay,
And
so we're charging lower rates. That's decrease in revenue is not less use or demand, it's lower rates.
It could be a factor of both. I haven't
Okay.
looked into
Yeah,
it, so I
right.
wouldn't say, because
Definitively.
there could also be a
Right.
decrease in usage.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Okay, so if there's no questions, we'll move on to the next item. I don't know if you need
Cable
to announce.
financials.
Okay. So moving on to the cable financials for 2024 Q1, we can see our income statement. Our operating revenue compared to plan is below plan 2%, and our operating expenses are also below plan 4%. That brings our total net income from operations below plan by 2%. And when we take a look at our adjustment for our IT, we are above plan by about 8%. Some of the IT stuff might also be timing of contracts coming in, because they do have a lot of major purchases that are once a year dollar amounts that hit at different points. And we do try to do our best to have those in prepaids, but with some of the town stuff, it just could be timing. Taking a look at our year over year, operating revenue has decreased about 7%, and so has our operating expenses, down about 6%. That brings our total net income from operations down about 20%, and once you factor in IT, we're down about 13%. Looking over at our balance sheet, total current assets have increased about 400,000. Total non-current assets increased 3.4 million, bringing our total asset increase to 3.9 million. And if we take a look, the majority of this is to our distribution facilities, the increase. It's about 3.7 million, and this is a direct result of the fiber project. Looking over at total liabilities, they have decreased year over year about 680,000, and our total earned surplus has increased about 4.5 million. This brings our total liabilities and current earned surplus to increase about 3.9 million. Jumping over to our cash flow statement, we started the year with our operating fund at 20.9 million, and it currently is at the end of March at 21 million. Some of this is due, I wanted to say the remaining bond money of this 2.4 million at this point is most likely used up. I haven't done a new bond evaluation in Q1 or 2 this year, but I'd expect that by the time we do it, we have used this 2.4. So going forward, a lot of the spend from the fiber project will be coming out of either our depreciation fund and or operating fund, depending on how much the spend is. Taking a look at our overall position, we started the year at 47.5 million, and through March we are at 48.6 million. Any questions?
I guess, is there any concern, because I'm just looking at the signal sales and then the internet, and they're not, like, the internet sales aren't increasing at the same rate that the signal sales are decreasing. And do we have an explanation for, I mean, I know we're in this big transition period between going, is there going to be a catch-up there at some point?
Not necessarily. So one thing, they're somewhat independent in my mind, because with signal sales, you also have a difference in signal costs.
Yep.
So as we reduce the number of prospective customers, in theory, our costs go down. In some points, they may not go down because you have thresholds for, minimum 5,000 customers,
Yep.
whatnot.
Yep.
From a internet perspective, we will see some people moving over who didn't have internet today over to fiber as they move to streaming. But people that had internet previously, they're not necessarily changing their internet. And people, as they move over to fiber, it depends what type of package.
Sure.
Some people might decrease their package, some people might increase their package, and that's just more predictive trending. But I wouldn't expect to see signal necessarily decrease while internet jumps up a ton in relation to each other.
So the signal, are we including the streaming platform in the signal?
Correct.
Okay.
On the internet side, once we build out the major capital costs, is our key cost then personnel in providing internet services, or is there ongoing fees or costs associated with the internet side, similar to a signal fee?
There will always be maintenance costs, even just to the distribution network. So there's different philosophies from a management perspective of how you can run a distribution system. One can be, don't fix it until it's broke. Others are, try to do the regular maintenance that you would need over time. There's pros and cons to both. One of the cons of don't fix it until it's broke is you can run into cascading effects when stuff goes wrong, right? So one of the things that we also have to look at is the cost to maintain infrastructure on the head end. From a head end perspective, different from a distribution perspective, it's almost like the minute you finish updating this stuff, you got to all of a sudden start planning for how you're going to replace it, because it's only, its lifespan is less than 10 years. Mm-hmm. It could be about 8. On the distribution side, it's a little more unknown for, how much and how long it takes. But if all of a sudden you have an electric cable crash into the fiber, it's going to burn it up, and now you have to repair those type of things. But there still will be a maintenance cost. There's still going to be cost of providing services attached. It just, we won't have the capital expense of the infrastructure.
How about when we're complete with the fiber installation? How do we disestablish the cable system? Because it would seem to me that we have to take all that stuff off the poles.
Yeah.
Yes and no. So I got a crash course in this. Right? You have, from one pole to another pole, you have a piece of wire that goes across that helps support the coax line. Instead of adding a new piece of wire and then doing the fiber, what we did was we strung the fiber up to that pole and we lash it. So the cable infrastructure, the coax system, is still attached to that line. Yeah. We are just going to turn it off the signal at that point. It does not make sense to unlash all those and pull that down. It will be pulled down as maintenance happens. So if all of a sudden that run of fiber has to be replaced for any reason, or touched or updated, they may go through and pull those down. At that point, that stuff will come down, it'll get scrapped, we'll receive the scrap value for it. I've talked to our auditors about how we want to do that from a capital asset perspective, because at some point we do have to decommission the plant and remove that value off. Originally, my understanding was I thought that the wire helped provide the support. It does not, so we will look at what point do we want to remove that off the books, because technically it's still there, but it's not providing service. So at this time, we haven't removed any costs for that, because in every node that we've had, we still had some customer on coax, so it's still being used. Over the next year or so, that's where it'll get interesting, and we'll figure out how we go about removing those costs off the books, because it's not like it's all gonna come off at once, it's gonna come off in stages, and what is the dollar value. That's actually something that I've been looking at for a bunch of different things, because as we go through and we decommission substations and other items, we just have total balls of money in these things, and well, what is the cost that related to that? And I actually had me yesterday, I was in our old town handbooks and whatnot, flipping through, just looking at stuff to figure out costs. Very informational stuff.
Our license, the cable side license is 5 years, I believe. We renewed 5 years, not 10. Do we know what year that is? Was it just a year and a half or 2 years ago that we renewed, or last year?
So they're staggered.
Oh, it is?
So we have retransmission, consent. Those are every 3 years. Some channels are.
I guess I meant with
offset.
the town license that we just renewed, the 5-year. What's that?
Yes.
What's that term? Do you know?
I'm sorry. Yeah. So the franchise contract is a 5-year term. That was 2023, 2028.
Okay, the 28.
Okay.
And just, if I may add one addition that popped in my head to your question about the ongoing broadband costs. I think to complete the picture, we also buy that in bulk. So almost like power supply contracts, we have,
I see.
we have contracts with bulk providers to allow us up to a certain amount of bandwidth across the town as a whole. So we do manage a larger contractual commitment to allow us to have a certain amount of bandwidth.
And there's no MWEC on the internet side, right? So we're all doing that on our own?
Yes, good question.
Mhm.
We've looked at that a bit just to see
Their value.
or even creating one.
Yeah, right.
And so that's something we're keeping an eye on as more and more municipal providers kind of pop up.
Right. And so we think we have the same competitive buying power as whoever else is buying it from bulk?
It's hard to get that information, but
Yeah.
I would say my sentiment is yes.
Yeah,
We have competitive rates.
right.
We also, with the buying power, there's certain agreements that we have with different organizations where if they piggyback on our network to do stuff, they will send us revenue.
Mm-hmm.
It's minor, but it's still helpful.
Okay, good, great. So it looks like cable's flush, and electrical we're gonna visit in August, because we wanna make it flush as well.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll just stay up here for the next one.
Oh, okay, sure. The next two topics kind of go hand in hand, and they're both on the voluntary pilot programs. The first one's on the electric pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. And the second one is cable pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. And so I'll turn that over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is our annual recommendation to this group on what we'd like to contribute as a payment in lieu of taxes on behalf of electric service and cable service. We combined it into one memo. And so, as you will see in the memo, This year's recommendation is $730,577 for electric, and then cable service is $800,198 with an asterisk in there, which I'll explain. So the way this is calculated, and I continued to add some of the context behind pilot payment and the content, or the body of the memo, excuse me. And so I'm happy to answer any questions on that. But going through the calculation mindset, it really can be anything. Pilot does not have any statutory calculation criteria that would need to be followed. It's really at the discretion of this group. But there are obviously rules of thumb or industry standards, if you will, that folks follow. And so one of the things that I like to keep in mind is that quite often the pilot payment and the contributions to the town are often compared to what a private provider would generate to a community. So I use that as a benchmark in making a recommendation on what should be contributed. And so you'll see in the second page of the memo, just speaking for electric, the 2023 net plant value times the tax rate generates that baseline benchmark of what a private utility would pay if they were in Shrewsbury, or even just using some reference points. We do check and see what Eversource Gas pays. There are a bit of Verizon infrastructure in town, so we do take a look at what they contribute as tax payments. And indeed, it falls in line. The Eversource Gas infrastructure has a similar plant value to our electric, and so we can kind of see that. So as you'll see, line item number 1 takes the 2023 plant value of roughly 38 million times the $12.38 gets you 471,000. And as just for reference point and thoroughness, you'll see that's about what Eversource Gas pays with a similar net plant value. That's about their payment that you can find on the records for the town. And then there's this additional component, supplemental budgetary support. So I think, SELCO and Public Power in general takes pride in being a strong community partner. So that's where the supplemental budgetary support can come in. It's really at the discretion of this group. This is also informed a bit by some of our surveys to see what other public power agencies provide in pilot payments to their respective communities. And so you can do that. We have data points both locally in Massachusetts and nationally. Like many sets of data, you can find anywhere from 0 to a couple of $1 million. And so in this particular case, I think the noteworthy point is this amount is on par with a median to average contribution that a community in Massachusetts would provide of our size. So that supplemental that supplemental budgetary support keeps us in line with those metrics as well. So you'll see there those combined total contribution from SELCO Electric of $730,000 is this year's recommendation for the electric side. It does dovetail with cable because we can use that discretion based on some of the things that Jim just presented on to make those contributions from either category of funds, cable funds or electric funds. So that's why I kind of bunched it together in one. Same approach here, and I'll get into the quick asterisk that I added in here. The net plant value, and that will continue to go up as we start to leverage the fiber system more fully. But right now, that has a listing of 24.6 million. So that gets the 305,000 as a baseline metric of a private provider. We also are IT, so the cable side is less regulated, if you will, than the electric side. So we categorize our IT services as cable employees. And so any additional IT support payments as we gradually I guess, solidify that contract with the town, and they start to contribute more of actual cost. Any shortfall, if you will, is captured into the cable budget, and so I've recommended that the IT support payment come out of the cable cash reserve. And then item 3 is the unique one for this year. One of the things that we're strongly pursuing is some kind of siting for a SELCO facility. And so one of the things that, not essential, but I think it would be something worth considering, is if we're able to work with the town, looking back at some of the prior land acquisitions, namely Parker Road. I mean, there have not been many for sure, but if you look at back in the 80s with the Parker Road acquisition, there is the prospect that town meeting members, when part of that process is the town, if we do secure land from the town, it would be like they do at the schools. Town meeting turns over care, custody, and control to SELCO, and it's well within town meetings' jurisdiction to ask for some form of financial consideration for that. So I added this in here if we're looking to potentially pursue land at an upcoming town meeting, perhaps a fall town meeting. Item 3 would allow us to offer some form of cash consideration for that, and that's why item 3 is in there as an item for consideration there. We don't have, like I said, I put in there to add a discussion point, and certainly happy to answer questions. That number also comes from the ability for us to make sure we're matching numbers that have been presented at town meetings and town meetings prior, so it kind of makes the numbers whole, if you will, or equivalent. And that's why it's so specific, I guess. And so that's just more of an optional.
Okay, so basically you're in, we're looking to approve the numbers that you're presenting for electric and for cable pilot payment in lieu of taxes. They match what was approved by town meeting.
Yes.
In the previous, in May. Okay. Normally, we should have this meeting prior to
Yes,
town
I'm
meeting.
just going to say this.
Okay, so that in March or April, we come up with the numbers
Right.
already.
Yeah.
Because we knew that we worked those numbers were good, but we supported that through the town meeting warrant and whatever. But for the future,
Right.
okay, we normally approve the pilot before, so I'd like to see that.
Sure.
I have no problems with what we're providing for the numbers. Anybody else have any other comments on the electric or cable?
So in the past, we used to approve it in March? Is that how we used to do it? When's the town meeting? It's May, right?
Town's in
And
May.
so
Yeah, it's usually
we used to
before the
approve it
town
by the April meeting? Is that how we used to do it?
We used to send the payment in December, and I'll say that it often got incorporated with our traditional transfer of the cable franchise payments, so it wasn't necessarily explicitly an agenda item.
Mhm.
So,
Right, so now we want to get it, because of our budgetary cycle, the way we have it set up new, we want to get it so that we're ahead of the town meeting.
Yeah, our goal is March.
Right.
Right, okay. And no harm, no foul, we're matching up with what was approved by town meeting, what we said we were going to give them, and that's what we're giving them.
Right.
exactly.
Okay? We have a motion to approve the electric and cable pilot.
So moved.
A second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a discussion next, and this goes back to you two, because of what you presented. We have normally during the summer, July and August, we don't have a monthly meeting. However, based on the heads up that we had on the electrical side, that we probably need to have a meeting sometime this summer. And so I think the proposed is 6th of August. And I don't know, do you want to explain what that meeting would or entail, or why we're gonna have that special meeting.
Sure. So we've engaged Baker Tilly for a cost of service study. They've been diligently working on that. We've sent them lots of information and data, and so they weren't quite in a position to have material presented for this meeting. So rather than delay through the summer, based on the financials we just presented, we'd like to be able to get a rate adjustment in, towards the beginning of fall. That's also a nice time as consumption tends to be lower, so any potential rate adjustments are felt to a lesser extent and allow a roll-in period. So adding a meeting in August, it looks like, based on the survey, would allow us to present on a prospective electric rate adjustment for for a September implementation.
Okay,
So you're talking the 6th then?
6th of August, I think everyone's been polled as to what would be an available date. Most people have concurred that the 6th of August would behoove us all. Okay? I don't think we have to approve anything. We just know that when we secure from this meeting, the next meeting will be held on August 6th, 2024, and we'll do that, at 0800 as normal?
If that's convenient, sure.
Okay, great. Finally, we go to the general manager's highlights.
All right. Well, staying in that theme, I tried to pull some legislative bits to add context, because obviously no one likes to talk about rate increases. And, we do everything we can to avoid those. However, they're inevitable. And so in that theme of benchmarking, I included several articles here just for reference points and a reference should anyone ask. And so, as you can see, Eversource, New Hampshire, they're not in Massachusetts, but Eversource being a major utility in the region, including Massachusetts, there's often overlap with a lot of this. And so you can see the New Hampshire rate proposal is raising average residential rates by 17%. And then there's a pay for performance mechanism where if they set particular performance metrics that they'd get even more money. It's an interesting proposal that I'm curious to see how, how a vetting process goes for that.
So they should be doing the job, and now that they're doing the job, they're gonna get
More money.
a little money.
Exactly.
Ridiculous.
So then just in that theme, there's some additional costs that we look at, and we participate to the extent that we can with utilities of our size and other public power partners with respect to these 4 major grid operators may have unjust rules concerning transmission owner rights to pay for and earn a profit on network upgrades. So if you look at our warrants and our bills, our transmission costs are sky high, and they are one of those few things that are predictably going up every year without fail. And so, we look at the rules for that. It's a unique set of circumstances where, a very select few utilities are allowed to build out transmission projects, and they get a guaranteed return on investment, which is an interesting proposition as well, where you can invest in stocks or any, mutual funds, and, you're not guaranteed anything. But however, if you are lucky enough to build a transmission line, you're going to get a guaranteed 12% return on your investment. And so it's, when you lay it out that way, it's not a surprise that they're very protective about having additional entrants into that market space. Public power, we've identified that as the next frontier for further investment. As you might recall, we get a lot of benefit from the NYPA transmission lines and the Hydro-Quebec transmission line. and we just have been, for lack of a better term, boxed out for further investments where we bring low-cost capital, as we do with all of our projects, whether it's Shrewsbury or a regional transmission line in Canada. We can really drive down ratepayer costs with our low borrowing rates and just the public power business model in general. So we've been working hard to kind of break into that market, and this is helpful in that respect as well, because as you can see, you're starting to review these rules and making it more visible to ratepayers that some of these costs are unnecessary.
We need the transmission lines, and we got to incentivize people to build them.
Yes.
And are they getting the permits to build them?
No, that's the difficult part. The permits have been tricky, as we've seen through Maine is a big one.
Yeah.
And that's part, not to continue on for too long on this particular topic, but that's part of our proposal with public power is our connection to communities. So, for instance, if we go through Maine, there's a number of Maine public power communities. You know the community, you know the local leadership, and so you can secure those permits a lot easier. So we do advocate for that when trying to be included in this development process. And then a couple other noteworthy ones. I just threw in a few others, just respect to power supply mix, nuclear packages. With respect to costs, that's what we're looking at with the cost of service study is we've done GTA adjustments over the last couple of years, but we have not adjusted our distribution rates. And so those impact the categories that are affected by inflation. So, transformer purchases, poles, wire, commodities, fuel, anything like that. And so you can see, I threw a couple articles in here, like winter energy prices hit 5-year low. And so that's where it corresponds. You can see our GTA right now is set to 0. However, similar to the other larger utilities as well, there is a need for a rate increase, and that's to cover the distribution side of things, which hasn't been touched in a few years. And then, let's see, the other ones I added, then there's the 8% benchmark just across the nation, so you can look at our regional cost, but then I like to keep track of the national picture as well, and you're looking at U.S. overall electric bills through the summer are going to increase 8% in 2024, and that's just another statistic that I don't know, maybe I'm the only person interested in the data, but I just like to throw that out there as just something to keep in mind as we look at our own situation. And then just a couple other notes with respect to service and the utility operating environment up in Maine, Connecticut, more regionally. One I did want to call attention to as well with the Central Maine Power in Maine near settlement over complaint, the utility overspent on power restoration. And again, I know it's something that we all know, but it's worth highlighting is there in the IOU side, when they do storm restoration, they calculate those costs and then they further incorporate those into the rates and seek ratepayer relief for those restoration costs. However efficient it is or inefficient it is, everyone in a private, investor-owned utility is on the hook for that. And so that's where occasionally they investigate on how effective those restoration work was, and as you can see, it's actually happening more and more that they find that there's an over collection there, and so it's a funny juxtaposition between the public power space and the private utilities. And then closer to home, through in the national grid, 12.7% increase is proposed for October 1st, so that is going to be all the neighboring communities to Shrewsbury. So if you have any friends that or family that doesn't live in Shrewsbury, but lives in the area. That's what they're looking at. Okay, so let's see. And then moving, unless you have any questions, I'll move on just to the other SELCO-specific topics.
No.
We've had some human resources activity. We're very fortunate. We hired 2 highly skilled apprentices that come to us with already have some experience, which is great. We did put in here, Scotty is back doing some infrastructure survey work for us to make sure our GIS mapping is up to snuff. And we did extend an offer. He was going to start yesterday, but we changed it, so we have another double E starting on Thursday, Evan, which will be great. And then we're continuing to work to bolster that inventory and facilities position. That I believe we discussed that last meeting. And then just a few other noteworthy points that I'm happy to go through all of these, but I'll call attention to a few of these. The first summer market, I happen to go to as well. Well, I've been to both, but I thought those are great, and we have our folks staff a booth there, that was, like I said, well attended, and we got to meet with a few folks on that one. We had our all-company meeting on May 31st. I forgot to mention that one. I think that has been going over very well, where, you know, with our 3 separate buildings and folks that don't really get to interface with each other on a regular basis, we've been able to take 2 times a year where everyone comes together and we get to, you know, really network with each other. And then on top of that, this Friday, June 28th, from 11 to 2, our Municipal Drive facility is going to have the community open house. So far, I've not checked this morning, but the weather looks good. And even with the rain last year, it was well attended. So we're looking forward to a pretty good crowd at that one. I just have to give credit to Val for really making that happen, and she does a great job. Let's see. And then the rest, like I say, I could go through each one. I'm happy to answer questions, but the rest are pretty standard operating activities. Patrick Collins, I thought, had a noteworthy presentation at the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative Peer Connect webinar series. So if you click the link there, you could see his presentation on EVs. So kudos to him. I thought that went well.
One question about the solar on the police station.
Sure.
How does that work out for us?
Oh, that's great. So we completed the the bidding process. We have the contract with ACE. That will be directly interconnected to our system, so we'll incorporate that with our general power supply portfolio for everyone to.
So we're receiving.
So we'll receive the full output.
So basically, the solar goes onto our grid, just like down at
Cherry Street.
The Monofield.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it comes on, it's not their own battery backup, it's not just supporting the police department, it's an available site where the whole community benefits by the
Yes.
power that's generated.
Exactly.
Okay, and will that, do we think that the solar panels will generate more than enough power that what the police usually demand, so that in fact, it'll be more than just a, break even? So we have no idea right now.
I don't believe it'll be a substantial overproduction.
Mm-hmm.
It will depend on the season as well.
Yeah.
In a good way, many of their systems that they were able to, given its unique service it provides, they did electrify quite a bit of the building.
Yeah.
So this will help offset that, but
Okay.
generally
determined.
speaking,
Okay.
generally speaking, it'll be just part of the overall portfolio.
Great. Okay.
And then I guess the big one, you can see our general projects there for the electric side. The AMI project is still proceeding, I'd say, quite quickly. We have over 5,500 AMI meters deployed, and so that's also spread out around the system. So it's not like one particular area is complete. We do have the network established throughout the territory, so it's allows us to deploy AMI meters, opportunistically as well as planned exchanges. So
Excuse me, what is that Greenbrier development?
Greenbrier.
It says 70% design and estimate of Greenbrier. URD, what's the thing?
Oh, okay, so that's yes, I see where you are. The underground residential development. So that one is, I believe that's the one off of Route 20. I forget the actual address.
Okay.
But that's one of those larger
Yes.
build-outs. Is that, I'm sorry, it just
Yeah,
escaped me
I understand where you are.
but there's, that area of town has that larger development proposed. And so we have the design for that. Yep. And then construction handbook. Oh, the sheep, we've had some press on that. The sheep are back. And I believe the sheep will be at the open house.
Oh,
So
really?
They're eating their
If
way
you'd
up
like to-
140
an
now.
autograph.
Are they gonna
it'll
come
be there.
hungry, or are they
Inching their
gonna?
way up 140 as it is.
Um,
Val's out there kind of chumming the.
And I just mowed my lawn too.
Yeah, I think it's worked out very well, and they are I guess, speaking for myself, surprisingly effective at keeping the grass short.
Versus goats that would jump on the top of the solar panels,
Yes.
right?
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's why you have to have the sheep.
All right, then switching quickly to the cable side, we're also full bore on the stream conversion. As you can see there, we're at 47.81%. We average 160 installations per week, which is around 650 per month. We are trying to keep that pace up as we barrel towards our August deadline where the DigiCipher technology goes end of life. So I think a lot of credit goes to that team. 650 installations per month, especially these are scheduling installations in people's homes around their schedule, around their lives and work and what have you. So, I think that is going as fast as possible, and so we've made significant progress there, and we'll continue to do so.
Well, speaking from experience, recent experience, my soon-to-be 93-year-old mother, her birthday's tomorrow, the folks from SELCO came in, she's up at Southgate, and she had no internet, so they brought in internet, Wi-Fi, and set her up with the stream, and additionally, we opted to go with the small boxes, which just is really super for her as an older lady with poor vision and a small controller. She's able to use the My TV button to immediately in the morning to set herself up to be operational for the day. And so I thought the installation was excellent. The people that came up, the person that came up that helped do it, and just the way that if my mom, who's only got one eye that works and is 93 years old, can make it work, I think most everybody should not have a fear of going to the stream.
Does your mom watch these meetings?
Hell no.
Tries not to.
So we sing happy birthday?
She's just, no, she's listening.
Nice.
Yeah, she does, but then she gives me, critiques me on some. I scratch my beard too much, or
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Well, happy birthday, Bob Hollis.
You look like you're putting on weight on TV. Okay.
All right, and then on top of that, it would be prudent to include information about the internet outage.
Oh,
So,
Yeah, that was big.
Yeah.
That was June 17th, a date we'll certainly remember, but, yeah, so there's some of the key, points from that whole ordeal. Certainly not something we like to have happen. So the Cliff's Notes version is, as you can see, at 550. there was a squirrel-induced power outage that took down a phase. And then the key question, as we saw some posts on social media too, well, what about our backup generator? And so we went, and in the moment, backup generator didn't kick on, and we do have a UPS, but really that's designed for a very short-term backup as the generator starts to ramp up to speed. So that lasted as long as it could, as you can see, till 6:35. And so as as the responding team tried to figure out why the generator wasn't turning on, they did find that the basically your typical car battery inside the unit had low voltage. So in the moment, they jumped it out with the pickup truck and got it back up and running. And so as you can see, there's more events with actual respect to the restoration. Once the generator was running, the fiber equipment came back up the quickest, which is a testament to the team and the newer technology. With the power surge, that created some equipment damage in the head end on the older equipment, so kudos to the team there, as they had to pull all the spare parts. They're taking these chassis down, they're putting in new power supplies, reprogramming it and putting them back on. Because, as one would expect, right, a full blackout of a head end isn't the ideal scenario, and that's certainly not a common occurrence. So we went back after action. So as you can see, they worked on that for quite some time, and then everything gradually came on as they started fixing the equipment and making and all the programming came back. As you can see, that's as the different services came back online. The interesting thing in the after action report is in today's day and age of everything is electronic, we went back, we pulled the self-test reports. Our generator self-tests every week. All the tests, it's passed successfully. So, we changed out the batteries a day or two later. I think it might have been the next day. And so the fact that it was 1 volt too low seems to have caused this issue, and the generator didn't kick on. So we have the generator maintenance company coming in and looking at why the battery, 1 volt low, like I said, it just passed the test a week prior, so why it didn't create an alert or alarm of some kind is that's the next step of this whole thing. Was there a malfunction of some kind in the processor or the transfer switch? But anyway, that was the root cause, is ultimately the battery itself in the generating unit. Generators new, for anyone else that might have that question, I believe relatively new, 2008. So it's it's well within its useful life. And so we're looking at, we're investigating basically the battery as the root cause. And
Do they turn them on to make sure they're actually starting, or is it just a self-test? I mean, it physically
it
starts?
physically starts, and those are in the logs.
Yeah, okay.
So it's...
This was a fairly significant event. I'm wondering if we could, maybe in the September meeting, whatever, get follow-on like either lessons learned or changes made or something, so that we can get an understanding of, obviously we can't, you can't, and the the staff can't predict every potential problem, but when something like this happens, it's actually a gift because it alerts you as to your vulnerabilities. But it's not a gift that then obviously you're taking action right away. And kudos to SELCO as usual. We react really well and really fast to,
Sure.
It's all hands on deck, and the support, you could just tell, and the community very much supports that, and I think recognizes it. On the other hand, the fact that it happens, even though we have testing and we think that that's a vulnerability. So the question is, why do we have the vulnerability, and what are we changing? What are we changing to fix this vulnerability. So I'd love like some kind of reporting on it in September or something, as to see,
Yep.
well, what are we doing differently? You know, because it shouldn't be, right? Obviously, that a 1 volt hit hits your battery, and maybe there's supposed to be a backup battery, or maybe that's impossible. There's the testing that does it, or it's just a timing, unfortunate timing. So anyway.
Yeah, and another thing that we've discussed in the past was with the potential of a second head end.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to see maybe part of that report is if that's one of the
Some kind of
ways
duplication.
ahead for the,
How practical
Yeah.
is that?
is to have a backup like that. Because we had talked about, with it being at Parker, they put something down towards the southeast portion of the town, just diagonal across. But that's one option, so anyways.
Sure. If I may add, yes, right after, like Mike mentioned, an outage like that shows us the different vulnerabilities that we have. We started, right after we got the situation under control, we started researching of a possible disaster recovery, even though ideally we'll be having a second head end, but having disaster recovery facilities will also be beneficial as we could get systems that started or services restarted a lot sooner than it took us, or ideally no outages at all.
Well, then we have to eradicate the squirrels in the town. I mean,
They
I
have the
impossible.
squirrel suicide prevention program put into effect.
don't think SELCO's going to start putting out squirrel poison,
Set up a
Yeah.
but thank you. It'd be interesting in seeing what that says.
If that's it, I mean, good.
Yeah, no, that was that, and the rest of the standard reports.
Okay. Well, one final thing that's not on the agenda, but after last meeting, we went into executive session, and part of that was to discuss appraisal for you as the general manager, and to also determine what the next year's pay scale would be in your situation. And so as a result of that, we came up with, because of things such as, and people can add on, the efforts that have been ongoing with fiber coming across the, bringing that across the town, making that 100%, and getting people off us cable to go do that. And upgrading overall the electrical grid as well, the higher voltage systems that are coming into effect to help in the future to lessen line losses and to make us more reliable. Things like the AMI, the metering system that's going into effect, that you had mentioned, that's come along very rapidly, and getting that to help us as well. The kind of evening out the electric loads during the day, trying to convince the folks that, hey, strategically, as far as it's not just handling the peak, it's kind of making sure that everybody understands that they can level the load a little bit, and we don't need as many massive production or buy as much power come 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 in the afternoon, if we can levelize that, and working through the community to go do that. Also training and response for our electrical linemen who are going up to NEPA and taking, we're getting all hands to go through there for safety and for technology advancements, and also just for their own professional development. It's great. And things like the carbon-free environment that we're trying to, the goals that we're setting up as well to get our non-reliability of carbon emitting generation and whatnot. So all those things were taken into consideration, and as a result, does anybody have any other comments before we announce what the salary was that we determined? If not,
Doing a good job.
yeah. Overall, your salary was approved to go to $256,452 for next year, and we need to publicly announce that, and so I have. Okay. Anything else? And if not, can we have a motion to adjourn to have our next meeting on 0800 on August 6th?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.